up if you have a question, if you have a comment, you have something you want to share, and I can put you on speaker and we can go that way. So, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your day today to join me for this topic, which is crafting your personal leadership brand. Now, I'm Tina Joseph, as you know, and I am a leadership coach who um, actually specializes in what I like to call leadership transitions. And that means that I like to work with people who are taking on kind of more people leadership responsibilities for the first time. And so that's why I love to work with new managers. I also like to work with entrepreneurs who are kind of stepping into that CEO role for the first time as well. So everyone asks me what the first step in kind of leadership development is. And I always answer with leading yourself, right? This concept of self-leadership is so important to all of the capabilities that are under this construct. In order to lead others, I truly believe that you have to be really good at leading yourself. And this means taking some time to really understand who you are, what you stand for, how and who you want to lead, what you want to be remembered as. All of these things are really essential to making an impact with your new leadership roles in your career. So, if people don't do the work, I find that in this area, I find that they kind of struggle with making decisions. Maybe they feel a little bit like inauthentic, or maybe even like a bit of an imposter in their new leadership roles and responsibilities. You kind of feel like you don't know how to make decisions or how to act, and your go-to is maybe to copycat somebody, right? So somebody who may have been a really strong leader who led you in the past, you tend to go towards their styles of leadership. And that's fine, but it can kind of leaving you feeling out of depth when you come across a situation that you haven't seen kind of modeled before, right? You'll also find that if you don't take the time to kind of do this work, that your teams and the people that you're leading won't know how to win with you, right? And that means that you might be constantly performance managing or micromanaging them. And, that's a topic in and by itself for us to cover one day, but, they're not the same thing. But, at the end of the day, if we're not taking the time to define this leadership brand, then all of your greatness and that dream of having an impact just won't be realized, right? Even if you have great ideas, you're really good at a particular function, if we don't have a solid leadership brand that acts as your internal compass and helps you differentiate yourself, really will end up limiting your impact. It's a competency and it's a skill, one that we need to work on and practice in order to be good at it, right? Now, I know everyone here already understands this and owns it, right, as a concept, because you're here listening to understand and develop this particular capability today. And so with that in mind, I want to dive right in and talk about some of the steps that I've crafted and put together to help you define your leadership brand. Now, I usually run this as a kind of Zoom event, so I have visuals to go with it. So I am going to rely on my verbalization skills to kind of walk you through this. I'm also going to post this afterwards on my YouTube channel so that if you want to go back to it and maybe take some more time with yourself, and maybe if you lead other leaders with your other leaders to go through this exercise, it's a good one to come back to. Okay. So first I want to start with the leadership lens in general. And again, if you have something that you have as a question, comments, feel free to raise your hand here and I can unmute you and have you participate in the conversation. So the leadership lens, this is something that is essentially the way that we look at the world and the way that we interact with the world and the people within it. And what I've found is that most of us passively accept this life or leadership lens, meaning that, it's things that were influenced upon us as we were growing up. Things like our religion, our education, our parents, all the relationships and friendships we had, our socioeconomic statuses, where we lived from a geographic perspective. All of these things really influence that life lens and that leadership lens. This is a time when you're stepping into your leadership career to start to actively look at that lens and proactively and intentionally really pick out the values that are going to be kind of your compass and your lens going forward, right? And so I like to use this approach, which I call a value-based approach to creating your leadership brand, because it's going to feel really authentic and genuine to you. Because it's going to start with you identifying your values and really taking some time to, like I said, intentionally pick those values. So the exercise I like to do is, and you can Google this if you want, but just Google a list of values, right? So there's a whole bunch in there. You might even have some that are already there. You might have a company that you're working for that already has some values that you already align with. But the idea is that you're just going to brainstorm some values. Usually what I like to do is list the kind of 20 of them to start. So scan through, pick 20 of them that you really like. And then I like to take some time to kind of bucket the ones that are very similar to each other. So as an example, one of your values might be integrity, but you might bucket something like trust, accountability, competency, things like that might be bucketed under that. You might have things that are like joy is a value of yours, or work-life balance, or rest, something to do with mindfulness or health, and something like that might be one bucket. So the reason we're bucketing them is because we're trying to fine tune and distill them to probably your top 5. And you guys know that it helps to distill these lists because it just is something that you can, keep in your mind, in your frame of reference, but also it can be something that it's easy to build on, right? And it remains high level. So once you've created these 5 values, and, while we're talking here, go ahead and write those down, what some of those values would be. Let me just pause there for a moment and take a look. Let me give you some examples of values that I have on the sheet, and this can be something that you might be able to use yourself. So, there's abundance. We'll start with some A's: accomplishment, achievement, adventure, ambition, assertiveness, authenticity. Some of the B's could be boldness, bravery, brilliance, caring, certainty, challenge, compassion, competence, dependability, discipline, empathy, enjoyment, enthusiasm, equality, ethical, expertise, family, fairness, focus, freedom, forgiveness, friendship, fun, grace, gratitude, generosity, independence, individuality, inspiring, integrity, intelligence, intuitive, joy, justice, knowledge, kindness, learning, logic, love, loyalty, mastery, maturity, moderation, openness, organization, passion, peace, playfulness, poise, positivity, self-actualization, self-development, self-respect, skillfulness, speed, spirituality, stability, stewardship, teamwork, thoroughness, thoughtfulness, timeliness, transparency, trustworthy, etc. Right? So you get a sense of what those are. So you've kind of crafted these values, and really at the end of the day, the reasons why these values are important is because they will help you become more aware of how you make decisions and allow you to be intentional and be able to map back to that value system when you are making decisions, right? It's another way of understanding when something or someone is rubbing you the wrong way. It could just be that they're approaching something a different way because they have different values that they're looking at it with or using in that particular situation. I also find that a majority of performance problems that we have with our teams are related to behavior, right? Not really skill sets, because you can, enhance the particular tech skill or hard skill, but really that soft skill, which is around behavior, comes from that underlying value system. And that's what you normally have to clear up first. And when your values are clear, you can create a really clear company culture or team culture. And again, it makes it easier to be an authentic leader. So let me give you an example of, like, for me, that whole passive versus active lens, right? Where I had a boss, a really great boss who I'm still friends with today, who used to have this mantra or saying that if you don't respect my time, you don't respect me. And that was an example of something that, to me at that point in time, in my stage of my career, I thought that made a lot of sense. And I started to use it as one of my own kind of value systems. But I found that for me, it just created a lot of internal conflict and dialogue, right? So I was always like really thinking at the end of the day, wow, that person doesn't respect me because they showed up late. And, now that I look back at that, it created a lot of tension because I was like totally judging this person. And then when I did get into interactions with them, etc., that judgment would come across, and that feeling of being slighted in some way was coming across. And in reality, that person just had other things to do, or something came up that just didn't allow them to be on time in that particular situation. I was making it mean something when it didn't need to mean that, and it was causing me a lot of pain and aggravation. So that's an example where, for me, I just want to be a little bit more curious, right? So I don't want to be judgmental. And that's an example of, me picking something or inheriting something and thinking that it could work for me, and then realizing that it wasn't something that was part of my value system. Another example too is that I was working with, I was coaching actually this other manager, and she was describing how she was finding it difficult to get along with somebody in the office. But unfortunately, it was somebody that she had to get along with because they were a major stakeholder in some of the work that she was responsible for. So it wasn't something she could avoid, and there was kind of no way of getting around this. And so when we kind of looked at her approach and some of her values, and we kind of thought about, how the other person was approaching situations, when she put herself in their shoes and she thought about it, she just realized that it was just, a different value system. So she's somebody who's extremely, well, not extremely, but she was extroverted. And I would say this other person was a little bit more introverted. And there was a way that she was approaching the person that was a little bit more telling than it was, collaborating with them. And so those are examples where she just had to realize that she was approaching it because she was kind of assuming that people were going to fall in line with the way that she was going to approach things. And that's just not the way it works in the real world, right? We don't all come from the same place. We don't act the same way. We don't believe in the same things. So great, Thomas. I'm glad that resonated with you. Thank you. Okay, so that's kind of, why values are important, and, examples of what those values are and how they can play out for you, either in a good way or a bad way. You guys want to give me a thumbs up? Like, how many of you have actually have some values listed, or understand what values you kind of, would list as your top 5? Okay, good. Great. Excellent. Okay. That's really helpful, because the next stage is I really like people to start to define the next level, which is expectations. So expectations are kind of the way that we describe our values in terms of behaviors and norms that we're creating in our teams, right? So they're an extension of your values, and they're going to govern the day-to-day running of your companies or interactions with your team members, right? So as an example, if you value integrity, then you might have an expectation that a team makes decisions to do the right thing, even if it's not the easiest thing, as an example, right? If you value hard work, then you might have an expectation that everyone takes personal ownership and accountability over what they're doing. And if you value joy, for example, then you might have an expectation that team members are focused on positive outcomes and solutions, right? So these expectations are broad on purpose. And this is something that I think is really important to understand, is and can be kind of almost a dangerous path to miss, is we're not using this value system to exclude people. It's really just to understand where people are coming from. So when you start to create these behaviors and norms that you would like to see as an extension of your value system, keeping it broad allows people within your communities to be able to interpret and express that as they see fit, right? So we're not shutting things down. We're allowing people to be who they are, but also to be able to do it in a way that's real to them, right? But also so that you can understand and get some clarity on why there might be some sort of conflict or difference or tension. And it's a clarity point that just helps you move beyond it, right? So that expectation thing is really not getting down to the level of it's a rule. That's what we're not trying to do. So I'm going to give you the example of somebody, again, taking this time thing because it's top of mind for me. But what happens when somebody shows up late for work, right? If you really thought, what's the first thought that comes to mind for you when somebody shows up late for work? And, some people might be saying, like me, I'm trying to be more curious and understanding where that person comes from. And I think with COVID, I think we've almost all gotten to that place of some sort of curiosity and patience for everybody's external life and how it plays out in the workplace. But really, what it's doing is like, some other people might say, oh, that person's just so unorganized, or maybe that person's lazy. Maybe that person doesn't care about this as much as I do. And it's useful to see how different people can view that same event differently, right? But when you can articulate when something like that personal ownership and accountability example, right? If you're saying you um, that you value personal ownership and accountability to get the things done, then you're not putting in a rule that says you have to be in on time. You're saying you're expected to show up when you have something that you're responsible for doing, right? And so that's the example there of how those things turn into expectations. Now, this is where I want to give some people some airtime if they want. Um, Raise your hand if you have a value that you would like to articulate as an expectation. And you'd either like to share it with the group, or if you would like my feedback or you're stuck on one of them, I can help you with that. Any takers? Okay, so Thomas, I see you. Let me and allow you to speak. Go ahead. Hmm. Go ahead. Tell me a little bit more of how that shows up for you. Hmm. 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 Yeah. So, um, what kind of parameters have you put in place so that they know that that work needed to be done at that time? Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And this is like so common because, this is so important because, thank you for sharing this, Thomas, because at the end of the day, if we have a value system, an expectation, a behavior, a cape that then translates into some sort of KPI, some sort of performance metric, the next step is holding people accountable, right? And that means that, an example is now having the conversation that says, here on our teams, and I'm going to give you an example. It might not be truly applicable to you because I don't know the whole context, but it's about now having a conversation where, we value ownership, personal ownership, and taking accountability. And, when this happens, that's not truly in alignment with the expectation. Tell me what's happening here, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So this is, definitely a very real situation, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to deal with it. So if it's a metric that's going to be measured, needs to be managed, and unfortunately that person then needs to be managed as the next step, right? So no, I appreciate that for sure. Thank you for sharing, because I'm sure a lot of other people benefited from that as well. So, so I want to just kind of recap, because I realize we're almost at time. Okay, so to move on, so we have the values, the expectations, and now it's basically time to kind of craft that leadership statement. And really what I like to do, and I think it's good for everybody to kind of write down for themselves, is I like to put together the things that we have here. So one thing that it starts with is, how do you want to be remembered as a leader? Okay. So that's the first thing you're going to answer. And then you're going to answer, the next sentence is by leading with, and that's where you're going to put in your top 3 values. And then you want to think about, at work, my team will feel, and describe the environment that you want to create for your team. So there's 3 kind of components there. How do you want to be remembered as a leader? What are your top 3 values? And what type of environment do you want to create for your team? If you are somebody who's heading up a team of leaders, or even a company, but even as a manager of a smaller team, another part that you can add on is, and we will know we are successful when, right? And this helps you really kind of tie together what it is you're about, what you value, and what type of environment you're creating. And once you do that, you can build off of that and stretch that so that it fits into, like we were just discussing, how you're hiring, how you're onboarding people, and how you are managing performance going forward rather. So the example that Thomas and I were describing is, once we have these things in place, we need to go to that next step, which is, starting to actually put this into your performance management framework and start to kind of create that team environment and culture that you want by either, maybe performance managing some people or coaching people. And the coaching aspect is kind of what I specialize in, really helping different leaders really learn to develop that coaching muscle, which helps people. It's really a framework to help people come to their own solutions and conclusions, because usually that's what they are willing to own, because they came up with it and run with going forward, which also is the accountability. So sometimes when you're in that conversation, like Thomas had brought up, it's worth having that conversation so that you can understand where they're coming from. Maybe they need something else that isn't apparent, right? And that's coming from that place of curiosity. You can understand if some of these standards, KPIs, behaviors, etc., are not being demonstrated because maybe we've just missed a thread here, right? Which is an opportunity. So we are at time, but you guys have a framework now to create that leadership brand. But I do have to say that the next step is to do something with this brand, because what is the value of having this vision and brand if you don't have an approach to actually put it into action? So I do have a workshop, Create Your Unstoppable 90-Day Plan, that is a perfect next step here, right? And in this workshop, you're going to be crystal clear on what you need to focus on and how to get there for the next 30, 60, and 90 days. It's a plan that will be ready to share with your boss, and it's going to show you how to incorporate your values and expectations into those performance management and onboarding and hiring, perhaps even firing processes going forward. But you're also going to be really, really confident that you're going to be able to cascade this down to your team and really get everybody on the same page to deliver the results. Because for some of you, you're leading an existing team where you're going to want to put this leadership value system, expectation system in something that's in flight, or you might actually be leading a brand new team, in which case, having this 90-day plan is just a stellar way to onboard the whole team and get them on the same page really quickly. It's also such a good time of year to do this because we are in Q4 of 2022 and 2023 is coming up quickly. And it gives you a way to really plan that out. You can think of it this way. If you were planning a trip for your family to go camping or, some sort of vacation, you wouldn't just drive there. You would plan the trip, right? You would figure out the route. You would figure out what the stops were going to be, what you're going to take, how to prep everyone so that when everyone gets there, they're having a good time. So I want you to think about your leadership career and what you're doing in the next 90 days the same way, right? There's results, there's a goal, but you need a roadmap to get there. So this workshop is only $7. It is, and I guarantee you're going to get some amazing results out of it and a very concrete plan. That link is actually in my bio to join. And again, I will put this on YouTube and share it on LinkedIn so that you can revisit this in the future if you would like, or share it with other people that you think would benefit from it. Thank you so much for coming to my first LinkedIn audio event, and I will engage with you guys soon. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day, everybody.